Welcome to this episode of Life Science Success. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Don, and I am a digital marketer in life sciences. And before we get started today in the interview with Eyal Ronen, I just wanted to play a quick message from our sponsor.
Being at the epicenter of the next breakthrough in biotechnology. That moment could happen for you this October at Bio on the Bayou 2025, where Southern innovation meets scientific excellence in the heart of New Orleans. Over 300 of the brightest minds in biotech are coming together for 2 extraordinary days in New Orleans. We're talking groundbreaking research from powerhouses like Tulane, Auburn, the University of Mississippi, Xavier University of Louisiana, and LSU Health. Expect revolutionary technologies, cutting-edge research, and industry-shaping expert panels that you won't find at any other event, plus networking opportunities that could transform your career. This isn't just another conference, it's an intensive 2-day summit where real partnerships form. We leverage the cutting-edge Partnering One platform to ensure that you'll connect with exactly the right people, whether you're seeking investors, research partners, or your next big opportunity. The future of biotechnology is being shaped right here in the broader Gulf South and having a global impact. Will you be part of it? Mark your calendar for October 28th and 29th. Head to bioonthebayou.com right now and secure your spot for the most exciting biotechnology event of 2025. The next breakthrough could be yours. Bio on the Bayou 2025. Register today.
In this episode of Life Science Success, my guest is Eyal Ronen. He's the Executive Vice President of Development at Evogene with over 20 years of life sciences sector experience, and he is going to share with us his evolution, and we'll dive into Evogene's mission and discover what inspires him. So with that, welcome, y'all.
Thank you. Thank you for having me in this meeting, and I'm happy to share my experience and knowledge of all the things I've done.
Yeah, it's great to have you on, and I sort of like to start these interviews with having you just explain a little bit of your history, but also what is it that drew you to life sciences in the first place?
I think if I'm looking on my childhood back in Mount Carmel, where I was living, on the way to school, whether it was a primary school or later on at the high school, I was passing through the mountainside and I could observe all the plants and all the animals that were over there. And that was something that was intriguing and fascinating for me. That obviously influenced my direction and drew me to learn during the high school to have an accelerated class of biology and chemistry. And I think from those early days till today, this is something that was fascinating me to know what goes beyond the or inside the plants or inside the animals or what goes in the molecular level. That was something that was intriguing. And I think my passion to that was coming from those early days that I was going through the wild and observing plants and animals and birds and things like that. So that was something that was attracting my attention at that time.
Yeah, it's interesting to me how we all see the world, right? And some of us see different things, and when you're talking about like the plants and animals and things like that, I would say that my interest in like animals especially didn't come until much later in my life. I definitely was interested in more shiny objects, whenever I was growing up. But yeah, it is always interesting to hear, those stories. But I'm sure in
Yeah.
your 20 years of your career, you must have had some really pivotal moments as well. And so would love to hear more about, as you sort of made your journey through, what is it that kept you interested and more or less landed you where you are now?
I think if I'm looking on my career, on my development as a person, as a professional person in some of the companies I work for, was the major thing that was always intriguing for me was the first, I had my own curiosity to learn always new things. And the most interesting things were always touching the innovation, things that were never existent before, and now somebody came up with them and started developing new things. Not, when you graduate from high school and you learn all the chemistry and biology that was there 100 years ago or 50 years ago, that's something you need to go through. It's not necessarily fascinating or intriguing, but once you go into the industry, and if you tie your career with some of the more startup edge companies, you are facing a lot of new, fascinating, innovating things. And together with my curiosity, that's obviously leading you to be exposed to these cutting edge new things. And that's much more fascinating, interesting, and that obviously was influencing also my development career, because I was growing from big corporates that I was at the beginning to more the startup world and those places. And also as a function, when you go from existing sales to do business development, and that's really exploration of new frontiers and new fields that were not existing before you came over there.
Yeah, I feel like there's a there's a definite sort of transition that you have to make, especially if you're working, with large corporations versus smaller ones. Especially, in large corporations, I feel like things are so constrained. I remember my first sort of transition in industry was from a smaller company to a very large company, and I remember, essentially one of the conversations I had had with somebody was, you know, your role is only to do this one little part. It's not essentially all these things around it. And it was a big transition for me to go that way. And then to, work in corporate America for a number of years and then come back out and be in smaller organizations again. It's one of those things where I love the excitement of having broad level responsibility, but also I can understand why, larger corporations have to have more focus as well.
Yeah. It's not necessarily contradicting. On one hand, you can say big corporates are serving you stability, and maybe you may feel that you are a small screw in a big organization and you do a very minor thing or something that is not the whole picture itself. Nevertheless, there are some corporates recently, in the past 10 years, I would say, or even more, a lot of corporates were either opening their own CVCs, corporate venture capital, so they are also exploring the fields of innovation. And in any of those existing corporates, they also have a special department which is dealing with the new frontiers and innovation. Nevertheless, if you want to grow your career as a person, moving from big corporates, giving you more chances in startups where you can capture a higher position with more influence and more a capability to lead strategy and execute it. While in big corporates, when you start young, and obviously some of the top rank positions are already captured, you need to spend at least 10 years or more till they will be open again. And sometimes if your rhythmus is in a higher rate, you want to move faster. So sometimes you need to either sacrifice a lot of years standing by in big corporations, or you can grow your career, but you need to leave the stability that corporate gives you and go to startup areas.
Yeah, yeah, and it is definitely a journey, and I feel like a different environment. But I also would think that in your specific role in business development, that you have to see, drastic differences from, what it would be maybe in large corporations versus where you're at Evogene. I just am curious, first of all, if you could describe a little bit of what business development is. I've asked this question a few times, whenever I've had coffee with people who are in business development, and I'm like, can you explain the difference to me between, um, being in sales versus being in business development? Because I see them as adjacent, but not the same. And just curious to see if your experience is the same.
Yeah, listen, when I was fulfilling vice president position of sales and marketing, obviously I came into existing market, into existing portfolio, and I was given price conditions, term payment conditions, and so on and so on. And then I was maneuvering between the different clients to sell them in the maximum rate possible and increase the capacity. And that was an existing materials, existing products. When it comes to business development, in most of the cases, the company may have developed something, but the market is not yet over there. That means that you need to explore. Sometimes you need to educate the market. Sometimes you are entering into existing market, but this way or another, for the company itself, you need to create the market for its product. It doesn't exist over there for a natural course. So you need to approach potential clients. You need to profile what is the target audience, which clients you need to approach, and which unmet problem you're answering. So it's really one stage before sales. And it's more fascinating because you actually, for me, as I said, the major essence is creating something out of nothing. You are reaching a virgin ground, something that was never over there before you came in, and you are really paving the new road for the company. So that's business development. Sales, you're entering already an existing scenario. You just need to increase or fulfill your KPIs to reach the goal.
Yeah, I think it's important. I think it's an important definition because I do think, that there are different people, especially that listen to the show, that are kind of exploring different things for their future. And who knows, maybe the next level of, business development leaders out there and considering the future. And your words, you could actually, speak to them in terms of the direction that they're wanting to go as
But
well.
by the way, as a person that was experiencing both routes, I would say, and people may challenge that, but I would say that doing business development is much more challenging than doing sales. Because eventually, when you're approaching sales, the clients over there, they recognize your product. It's a matter of terms and conditions that you'll help you to score. When we talk about business development, it's really paving a new frontier or a new road. Sometimes you need to educate. Sometimes you need to pass through convincing the other side. It's not necessarily something that he needs to have. It's sometimes good to have, but not something that oblige him. So for me, business development, it's much more challenging. Obviously, some people may challenge that and say, sales, you have numbers to meet, you have budget to fit, you have all those things. It's a different scenario. Both of them are challenging, but business development is really, to my opinion, doing both of the things. It's much more, first, interesting, but it's also much more challenging. And eventually, the end game of business development is sales, because once you succeeded convincing somebody about the technology, you eventually sign an agreement, which start with, let's say, POC, but later on it may turn into a continuous sales. So that's one stage before, I would say.
Yeah, and I what I'm hearing as well is that there's a level of if you think about both roles, right? There's both strategy and tactical execution that are involved in both roles. If I hear you correctly, your feeling is that business development has much more strategy first and then tactics on the back end. And then general sales, maybe it's, less of the strategy because that's already done and the market's already explored. You kind of know where product market fit is. And so, finding that is something that business development would have done ahead of having a traditional sales role.
Correct. It's as you said, the balance between strategy and tactics is in favor of strategy when we talk about business development. In sales, you do have some strategies, but it's mainly tactics. What will be the T's and C's of this agreement with the other agreement, whether I should approach this geography or this client. It's more on the tactic side. Strategically thinking, the business development is really directing the whole vessel, which is called the company, to this market or to this area, and so on and so on.
Very good. So can you tell me a little bit more about Evogene and their mission? What sets the company apart in the life sciences field?
So Evogene is, some people, when I'm telling them I'm working in Evogene, they were quite surprised because they think it's a seed company. I think the legacy of Evogene starts with the days of the big agreement with Monsanto, when Evogene was really a world leader in all the GMO technology, when it was still fascinating and had market acceptance, especially in the States. But from those days of doing big developments with Monsanto, And obviously it was acquired by Bayer, so that also changed a little bit the scenario. But Evogene has evolved quite dramatically and created something which is quite unique, although it is facing some difficulties in the market. But what it has created is that we created free softwares. We refer to them as tech engine, but eventually it's a kind of a software with a user interface. It has different models, and the whole aim of this technology is to help companies which are involved in life science product development, help them with the early stages of discovery and optimization. Let's say if a normal development of a product starts with finding the potent molecule, microorganism, or whatever, and later on making some tweaks, chemical or physical tweaks to improve it, and that's the optimization. And later on you go to the development, and by the end you have the commercialization. The early stages, 2 stages, are normally characterized by what we call false development, meaning that you necessarily put a lot of inputs, whether it is laboratory, capital, human resources, and so on and so on, and you may end up with some blockage on the candidates that you have started to explore because they will not be passing IP or regulatory or stability or cost of goods or COGS, as we say, and so on and so on. So what Evogene have decided to do is to solve this early stage development, to minimize the false development or the exhaust of resources. And to do that, it has worked on 2 elements. One of them is big data. As we know, normally researchers are focusing on narrowing their observation of a certain group of chemistry or a certain group of microbes or a certain genomics. So the idea is to say to the scientists is we are extending your observation. So we talk on big data, not on a small chemical group, but on the whole chemistry that exists over there, or not on certain microbes, but the whole microbes that exist in that space. And in order to do it in a very profound way, to enable you a multi-layer analysis, not only looking on the solving the problem, but looking on other aspects of potential candidates that may become a product, like, as I said, stability, formulation, IP, COGS, and so on and so on. We require, obviously, computational power. And to have a computational power, I'm not talking about regular computational, we talk about machine learning and AI. And that's in a way to define to the computer what is the profile of the final answer that you are looking for from different aspects, and then give the command to the computer, to the software, to look for that specific profile with all the characteristics that you have defined, and find something which is the closest possible with the existing big data that you have to that profile. And that's done in milliseconds or a few days, it depends on the question that you make. But the outcome of that process is that those candidates coming from that process are having higher chances to become eventually a product and commercialize, because you cleared a lot of potential obstacles which are normally only interacted at later stage of the research. So at 0 time, you try to clear all those obstacles. So the candidates coming out may have higher chances to become eventually a product and be commercialized. So Evogene developed 3 engines or 3 softwares. One is tackling the microbiome space, and it's called MicroBoost AI. And the microbes are coming from, we talk about soil microbiome, water microbiome, plant, human body microbiome from the gut, from the skin, from different sources. The other engine is called Campus AI, and it covers all the small synthesized chemistry molecules. And the third one is called Generator AI, from the word gene, like generator. And the idea over there, it's not exactly a process that leads you from A to Z, but it's a set of different tools that help you in all the genomic side of plants. Like if you want to go for developing genetic markers or genomic markers, it can help you. If you want to design a plasmid, when you talk about GMO, it can help you. If you want to do exploration of gene editing and design a guide RNA, it can help you. All kind of bioinformatic tools that help you to focus or narrow your activity into the right candidates. So these 3 engines are obviously enabling Evogene as a company to explore different frontiers, because with the microbiome space, the chemical space, and the genomic, I can approach different potential markets in that space.
Oh, very good. Well, thank you for sharing that. What about companies that would come to you? What do they typically look like? I mean, you described a little bit of, part of what you do in business development is sort of that the product market fit. I'm just curious, when customers come, what do they look like, and what are they trying to solve?
Obviously, if and it's regardless of the market that we are approaching. I would say when we talk about the leading big names in those sectors, clearly they may have developed something of their own. So they have their own laboratories, they have their own computational power, they have developed similar tools which may not necessarily be different from what we are offering. So obviously they are a little bit out of the scope, but that's not necessarily because we found out across the time that some of them are not necessarily investing that much in innovation and they look for external innovation. So then we can step in and help them. And we talk about big names in the ag space, for example, what could be Bayer, Syngenta, BASF, Corteva, FMC, and others. They may have something over there, but it's not necessarily tailored as ours, so they may still need it. But the majority of the potential clients would be what we call SMEs. That means that these are small, medium enterprises. They have some innovation more on the wet side, not necessarily on the computational. They have the capital resources, but not to the extent that they have the capability to develop this computational power by themselves. So they can utilize us as bringing them an existing platform, solving them the early stage development, and then those candidates that we point out go for their process and their assays of validation on their laboratories, on their farms, or wherever it is. So I would say the more small, medium enterprise areas, companies which are still seeking innovation, they are not continuously in stagnation, they look for something new, have some capital resources, but limited to what they do and have not the time or the resources to develop something of their own from the computational side, I mean.
Yeah, I think that's important, and a part of that, with the larger companies, not necessarily spending money on machine learning or AI. I've definitely seen a portion of that as well in some of my interactions that the companies for whatever reason just aren't investing, and my guess is the same, right? That they're looking for working with people that have the experience in the space instead of creating it on their own like they would have in the past. In a way, there's a strategic advantage in that too, that you're not wasting a lot of time trying to self-educate and expand your own capabilities, and instead go to broader experts too.
Yeah, and I think it requires different set of skills and expertise, because even if I look on the people that work in Evogene, some of them are obviously coming from the biology side. They are microbiologists, geneticists of all kinds, molecular biology, and so on and so on. But at least 50% of them are bioinformatics, DevOps people. So these are computational guys. They have nothing to do, or some of them have, but most of them do not have anything to do with biology. And that's a different set of expertise. Like if you take a company that is embedded, whether it is in a veterinary sector or life sciences of any other things, whether it is a plant or pharma, they have a lot of researchers which are doing the life science research, but these are not necessarily computational people or DevOps people. So if a company has already developed a platform, why should we invest 10 years and recruit a set of skills from outside while we can approach this company and get this as a service kind?
Very good. Are there some projects at Evogene that you're especially just proud of, that you can talk about? I'm just curious if there's anything that you could share with us that um, is more on the public side.
I would talk more about what is known in public, obviously with the
Sure.
limitations of being a public company. You know that except of that platform that we have described, Evogene in the course of time, and I would say in the past 7 years, also established its own subsidiaries. Those subsidiaries were, in a way, the best way to demonstrate the technology to the market. And that's on one hand. And on the other hand, they were also expected to be a revenue generator. So that was also beneficial from that side. So in the course of time, Evogene explored and opened 5 subsidiaries. Each one of them is working on different sector. And I think one recognition of the technology was the fact that those companies were getting what we call vote of confidence, because in some of them, we are not 100% owners of the company. That means that they already get some investment from investors from outside that obviously were assessing the technology, assessing the roadmap of the company, doing a deep due diligence. And that's in a way vote of confidence, because if a company like Corteva have decided to invest in Lavie Bio, that obviously goes without saying that that's a very strong achievement. They do deep due diligence. So we have Corteva invested in Lavie Bio. We have ICL, Israel Chemicals Limited, also invested over there. In the pharma space, we have a company called Biomica, which is doing drug discovery based on microbiome. So they got also an investment from Shanghai Healthcare VC. It's a venture capital from Hong Kong focusing on the pharma space. So that's in a way recognition that the technology is indeed working. And bear in mind, those companies existing for the past 7 years, and they are already having either a pipeline or they are very mature and progressive, and some of them are already having commercial sales. Not necessarily that all the things that Evogene have developed and explored were successful. Some of it objectively and subjectively were wrong decisions, as exist in every other company. I have to say we explored the medical cannabis space, but while we came with a value proposition over here that we said we are able to influence the genomics and create varieties with extended minor cannabinoids like CBC, CBN, CBL, and all those. The market was always interested in THC, high THC, as much as possible, and nobody was caring about that. So in a way, we came with a lot of capabilities, but it was not attending the market needs. And even if you look on the pharma space in that respect for the cannabinoids, no real company except I think Jazz Pharmaceuticals, they were the only one that were developing an FDA-approved drug based on cannabinoids, but the majority of the market left it. So not necessarily all the decisions that we're here making were correct, but in a way, I would say that the majority of the things that we have decided to go through were successful. Some recent achievements, I would say, and that's also very tricky, depends on how you look on that. We established a company that is doing molecular farming. I don't know if to say fortunately or unfortunately, but we came into the food space as well, food tech, and obviously the market today on the sentiment for food tech is not that high, I would say, from the capital markets. Nevertheless, we have the technological capabilities, so we started exploring the possibility of producing casein or expressing casein protein, which is normally driven from milk, in potato tubers. So we established with the biggest dairy company here in Israel called the Strauss Group. We established a company which is called Finally Food, and over there we are developing the expression of casein in potato tubers. Some may say you missed the train. Some may say that's very nice, you're coming with new technology. So there's some debate about it, but that's another signal that the diversity of possibilities within the organization called Evogene is quite wide. We can do a lot of things. On top of them, we had in the past year signing agreement with a company called Verb Biotics from the USA. And for them, it's a human probiotics company. So they came with a certain metabolite. We had to explore it, find its metabolic pathway, and recommend microbes that are able to produce that metabolite. So we filled our part and they continue with their development, but this is type of work that we do and work and collaborate with some potential partners. So these are the part of the highlights.
Thank you for sharing all of those. What was running through my mind as you were going through a few of them is that I wonder as well, does the future then mean that who knows, maybe somebody, especially for like the cannabinoid, possible pharmaceutical, you know, drugs that could come out as well, that I would imagine that eventually, more companies, might be exploring this as well. I think some of the companies that are currently, purifying for, high THC are, we're certainly exploring this idea of being an FDA approved drug company, but at the same time, I think a lot of them saw how difficult the actual pathway is. Um,
Yeah.
and I also think that there's the same discussion as well on the psychedelics, right? I mean, there's a lot of people exploring psychedelics today, but the question is like, do they find other uses that then could use Evogene's capability in the future?
And I think for specifically for cannabinoids, or if I'm trying to understand the regulatory pathway, let's take the FDA as an example. When you talk about synthesized chemistry, that's 1-0. You know exactly in a very definitive way what would be the outcome of the process. When we talk about a plant which is creating maybe 300 different molecules, and all of them are under what we call entourage effect, all of them are linked together, and you cannot define which one is the one that is doing the magic. To be consistent and be repeating the same composition again and again, it's something which is challenging, especially if you need to develop a drug that will be consistent and passing FDA. It's not trivial. I think that might be the reason why the big pharma have decided to drop it, because either you get an exemption from the FDA, or it's very challenging to make sure that every time you produce it, it will be the same as before, especially when it's involving biological material, which may be affected by weather conditions and other effects. So it's not consistent necessarily.
So how has your, I mean, I looked at your background. I saw that you have a background in agronomy. How has that and your MBA affected your ability to help Evogene?
Yeah. So, Evogene, obviously, it's a company which is more strongly embedded into the plant side of the business, or in the agronomy side of the business. We have two daughter companies which are working. One is on ag biologicals, the other one is on ag chemicals. We do gene editing in plants. We do microbes. So that's also functional in agriculture. So the fact that I'm an agronomist is obviously giving me an advantage on those areas. And in the new frontiers, whether we talk about veterinary, whether we talk about aquaculture, whether we talk about environmental, water treatment, diagnostics, and other things, I think from a certain point of time in your personal development, once you graduated from life sciences, and it regardless what would be the subject that you have focused on, that could be plain biology, that could be molecular biology, that could be microbiology, or agronomy, as I did. It gives you a set of tools, because it's eventually kind of a language. It gives you a set of tools and able to digest even and explore even new areas that are not necessarily your core knowledge. But when you read an article, you know exactly what it means. You know how to read it and how to approach. So from that perspective, for sure, the agronomy is my natural habitat. That's the area that I know very well, even market-wise, business-wise, and for sure from the scientific side. But it doesn't shed my possibility to learn new frontiers, because eventually, as I said, you have a set of tools. If you have the autodidact capability and natural curiosity, you can learn any new field in the life sciences. It doesn't mean that I will be the next CTO of a company in the aquaculture, but it's still enough to give you the set of tools and understanding and knowledge what are the elements that are required in this market. So that's on the professional side. On the MBA side, I think if I'm trying to crystallize the major essence that I grabbed from those studies, it's actually the linkage between the science and the technology and the economical side. And some of the things that I observed also in my career is that sometimes you may have a very excellent solution that technologically it is satisfying, and it passes all the aspects of working technology and so on and so on. But if it's not viable economically, and it doesn't, the numbers are not crunched correctly. And eventually you come with a solution, but the solution is not viable because it's 10 times more expensive than the alternative, or it's super expensive that nobody can actually use it, then it makes a problem. So companies, and normally startups are characterized, but because they come initially from the science side, it's people which are exploring and scientists are developing something new. But if it's not passing through the filtration of economics, it doesn't make sense. So I think the major essence that I caught from the MBA is that even if you have the technology, you need to make sure the economics works. And that's something that and especially in business development, you always look on one side, which is the technology. Let's see that it works. But now let's see if we are able to sell it, if somebody would be interested. Even if it will be expensive, what is the premium that we can take? What is the premium we can take on top of the existing solution? So MBA is it's a lot of fields a lot of courses that I took. But if I want to crystallize, the economical point of view is something that is embedded now very strongly into my observation, and that's essentially a component that is required in the business development side. You don't look on that as a scientific CTO-like person, but you look on one side which is the science, but the other side is the economic.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I feel like having that capability as well to cut across is important as well. So I wanted to switch just more broadly in terms of your view in terms of the life sciences sector. What challenges do you foresee in the life sciences sector, and how is Evogene preparing to address them?
One of the major challenges, and I would say the difficulties that it's not unique to Evogene. I would say it's across the board in Israel and worldwide, is that you see, because of the long intervals in biotechnology that it takes to develop either a drug or a crop protection material or any other solution which is driven from biology, you find that on one side, the capital markets, when they can have very quick wins through gaming, fintech, cybersecurity, the capitals which are directed into the biotechnology space are hesitant or limited. Obviously, they also got some cold feet because of failures or promises that were not met in the past. So from the capital side, that's really a challenge. You see less and less investors looking or willing to invest in some ideas or directions. Even if you have something which is quite developed, they prefer to wait till you pass more assessment and then they will invest. So that's on one side. On the other side, you see the same thing, and especially for a company like Evogene, which is helping other companies to develop their own solution. When you do some kind of a collaboration on a service side, you see that some of those big giants or big potential companies that you normally would approach and explore with them, they are also shutting down their own innovation. They are trying to maneuver within the existing portfolio, creating mixtures of all kinds, creating or manipulating existing products to enhance their lifetime or the exhaustion of the product before they go and do a full exploration. Because let's admit it, whether it is pharma space or crop protection or any other sector, the time interval that requires to go through development and research is something between 10 to 15, not to say 20 years. The regulatory pathway is quite extensive and also requires another set of few years. The development itself is quite hectic and involve a lot of success, but also a lot of failures. So big companies have the tendency to look for external innovation, cut their budgets for internal innovation, cut their budgets or as a general for new products. So obviously for a company that does not necessarily develop something of its own, and I'm putting aside the subsidiaries, they explore their products till the end, and these are the subsidiaries of Evogene. But Evogene as a company which is servicing as a collaboration as part of its business program, it's quite challenging because that means that there is less market attentiveness to what we are offering as a solution. Some companies are saying you have a magnificent solution, but we have decided to stop our innovation or stop our budget or stop doing anything that you are offering us. So that's very challenging on one side. The other thing is that if I'll take Evogene and we say that AI was on our flag, let's say 10 to 15 years backwards, this day I would say in a metaphoric way that every supermarket is adding his initials of AI to its name. So something that was quite rare and unique 15 years backwards, these days is becoming very common, not necessarily functioning as real AI, as we know. Some of them are claiming to have machine learning, but I'm not a computer guy, but I can tell you there are differences. But a solution that was quite unique and breakthrough 15 years backwards, maybe now it's more common because a lot of similar solutions exist. So AI became very common name, common use. So these are two challenging aspects, I would say, biotechnology with the capital markets and the solution that you offer, which are already facing a much more competitive landscape.
So I definitely see exactly what you're describing, that investors definitely want quicker wins. They're a little more hesitant as well. The one thing I'm sort of concerned about too around that same topic is just the fact that there's been a slow in investment. And if let's say larger pharmaceutical companies didn't pick up, any level of innovation on their side, right? And they were waiting for these smaller companies that might be developing things that they could just invest in, they may turn around at some point in the future. I don't know when that could be. Maybe it's 5 years from now or 10 years from now, right? I mean, you have to kind of think of where would the main sort of breaks be in the overall environment, and then kind of look out to the future and look for those same gaps, because we just might see a real starvation, I would say, of innovation. But we won't see it necessarily now, because I mean, these companies would be smaller now. There would be ones that kind of need that next round of investment. And even in the United States, where funding in general right now has just been turned off from the government, I think you're going to see the same exact thing. This is just going to cause further difficulties for these really small companies that could have had the next breakthrough cancer drug or whatever. It's just not going to be there whenever you turn around at some point in the future. And it would be really interesting to see if we do see a bubble or a dip, at one of those key points. I also saw that San Singh also said that the fundraising environment has become highly cautious despite the dry powder as well. So he's just saying the same thing, that he's seeing the same exact things for early R&D investment as well. So he just made that comment on LinkedIn too.
If you look on the financial markets or the capital markets, obviously you have the financial investors and you have the strategic investors. So the strategic investors, as you defined correctly, till the point their CEO will feel the starvation in the market, he won't push to fund $150 to $200 million in developing new drug and expect 10 years, probably he will retire to his pension before it will become a drug. So we say, I don't want to take that responsibility. So that's one thing. On the other hand, the capital markets, when they can have quick wins with those fintech, cybersecurity, and gaming areas, why should they go in biotechnology when the intervals are too long and the risk is way too high? So, and to be honest, there were some mistakes done by the industry in different industries in the life sciences when they created a very big high promises, and you can refer to that to the cannabis space as one example. You can refer to the food tech space as another example. Some companies were claiming we don't need any more cows, we don't need chickens, we don't need this and that. But they found out that technology-wise, it's not yet over there. Scaling up is not yet over there. Regulatory, there's a lot of things that need to be taken care of over there. And that creation, capital markets, financial investors, you create expectations. You don't meet those expectations, your stock is going down, and also the attention of the investors is going down. So some failures to deliver the message or deliver the expectations correctly were causing also those venture capitalists to be more hesitant and more cautious about their investment. So it's a mixture. And for sure, it's not making companies that are striving to develop new frontiers and really fascinating innovation. They need eventually money. If they won't get it, unfortunately, we will all lose because they will disappear, and that innovation will be going to the drawer for a few years
Yeah.
before it
Yeah.
become mature.
Yeah, absolutely. What's the greatest piece of leadership advice you've ever received?
I think I think the biggest advice that I was receiving personally is to be more collaborative. Business development in a way in a company, and it's regardless whether it is Evogene or another company, it's a kind of a bubble or kind of a company within a company, because I'm not doing the existing things, I'm doing all the new things. So normally, and sometimes you feel that you are in the frontier by yourself, and you do a lot of areas that nobody knows in the company or not yet familiar with in the company. And sometimes you feel in a way that you are isolated, because I'm dealing with areas or companies which are not yet known in the company till we reach a certain maturity. So I think one of the things that I learned along the years is that even if you may run on a different rhythmus, you need to make sure that the army is behind you, meaning that sometimes when you run too fast, but the company is not fully aligned, and I'm thinking about different corridors of the company, the science, the financials, the administrations, and other parts that you are required for you to move fast, it's something you need to relax yourself a little bit and align your movement with their movement. So this is one of the things that I was thinking that I was adapting a course of time. Obviously, now it's completely different, but this is something that is crucial for business development. You may run fast, but you need to make sure that all the others are following you in the same rhythmus. So that's my recommendation for any person that is doing that kind of work.
I feel like collaboration is an easy thing to talk about. It's a hard thing to actually do, right? I mean, it's something that you have to put real thought into. Um, who needs to know what and when and things like that. And I know in terms of my large corporate roles, there were oftentimes areas of the business that just didn't know, all of the things that they probably needed to know at different times. And the good thing is whenever you have larger teams, that are global and things like that. I mean, normally you have other people that are also sort of reaching out and collaborating too. So it's not just
Yeah,
dependent on one person. But at the same time, I hear exactly what you're saying. It's one of those things where you just allowing people to participate, gives them the opportunity to maybe give you some insight, but also just be a part of your journey.
yeah. And I think from the client side, if I'm trying to observe what I'm doing in Evogene, if I'll try to define the time lag that takes for me to bring a new collaboration, it would be from, let's say, the minimum would be discussions of half a year, 6 months, and in the worst scenario, that may take even 10 months, because the time and the intervals, and since you need to communicate with the other side, it takes time. It takes time to convince them, it takes time to meet again and again and again and repeat it and send information to them. It's a process, especially when your product is not that trivial, especially if your product is not something tangible. It's a computer software that you need to explain them. Some may think we are having a strong Google and we just do a search engine similar to that, but you need to explain them that that goes far beyond that kind of search. So especially when the product is not trivial, it takes more time. So the business development process may take even up to a year. Depends on how the client is responsive and how cautious he is about making a decision to move forward with you.
Absolutely. What inspires you?
I think it's very clear what I said at the beginning. I think anything that intrigues me is mainly in the course of innovation and technology. If I'm looking even on my career, I could always stay behind in a big corporate, doing more or less the same thing day after day and continuing in that course with stability. But on the other hand, one thing that was always intriguing me was innovation, new things, and especially when they are involving technology. I don't care about, I would say, stupid materials or stupid products. I'm always looking for those which are a little bit more complex and hard to convince or to sell. This is challenging, but the challenging is the thing that intrigues me. So it's an area of innovation with technology. That's something which for me was always appealing, and that's also, I think, represented very nicely through my career development. These are the companies I was exploring.
Very good. What concerns you?
Uh, in life or in Evogene in general?
It could be either. I mean, some people take it personally, and then other people, take the business route. So that's totally up to you.
Yeah, yeah. I think on the let's say general situation. I'm based in Israel, and obviously we are passing through worried days these days. We are in a way in a very hostile environment, but this is the land of our ancestors, so we are brought to here after exiled for thousands of years. So the situation, it's not in a way creating any fear or problem for me, but I wish it could be better, because then it will drag a lot of more positivity from the world. When we talk about, and that's also business-wise, about investment, about collaboration, about many things that can be done on the business side. From the security level, I have no doubts about my country, about our power, about our position, and about our opinion. Regarding, if I'll tie it more specifically to Evogene, I would say that eventually, with this type of technology that we have developed, in order to sustain the company for a longer period, you need to have a lot of collaborations. And that means, because the collaborations have obviously a limit to the amount of capital that it can generate. So obviously, you need to find a way to beat the numbers. I'm not sure that necessarily collaborations is something that is sustainable. And I also recommended that from doing, let's say, general collaborations in a low entry point, like doing probiotics for human and similar, the company should evolve and develop new frontiers. And when I'm saying new frontiers, that means that the company should pursue the establishment. The end game would be establishment of a new entity, the same as it's done before, because only when you have a new entity, and it can start as a division and later on become an entity. But the idea is that when you explore as an entity, you can go all the way to a product. And you can have JV with some potential collaborators that you started as a collaboration, but then you go together with them as a partner. And then when you go in that direction, you can beat the numbers very easily, because once you establish that new entity and you are pursuing a final product, that final product may generate much more substantial capital than doing exploration of hits and leads, which is really at the beginning or the bottom of the value chain of product development. So my worries is that the company need to take a decision to go in that course. Obviously, it requires a lot of deep assessment, not to make mistakes, not to go over the hype, and choose correctly the new frontiers that you want to evolve much more beyond hit and lead, and go into pre-product or product. So this is something which is challenging and worrying also.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Last question. What excites you?
What excites me? Obviously, success. When you, especially in business development, when I would say and I would say it as a general, not referring just personally to myself, but I would say, I'm always saying business development is 95% failure and 5% success. Because all the time, not all the time, but sometimes you get the door slammed at your face. Sometimes people are hesitating. Sometimes they delay their decision, and so on and so on. So you get all kind of answers like that. So my enthusiasm is driven by success. So when you're succeeding, moving into a project and you're establishing a new activity, that's obviously something which is exciting, especially when you are in light of 95% of the time that you are investing time and efforts which are not necessarily fruitful. Once you have 5% success, it's exciting and amazing, and it's obviously have a lot of mental influence on your feelings and so on and so on. So always when there is a success, I'm excited.
Yeah, I feel like there's almost I don't know. I feel like the people that are really good at sales or business development or alliance management. I mean, those are kind of three categories that I've kind of run across that are all kind of doing similar sort of things. But I feel like those individuals live for those moments, right? They live more for that sort of success moment and things like that. And yeah, I cannot completely understand what you say whenever you talk about the 95% as well, because I certainly have lived through it myself, where
Yeah.
hey, it's a struggle and a grind, and you gotta go through it every day. But at the same time, those moments whenever you have somebody say yes and they want to work with you, and there's no better feeling overall to have somebody acknowledge that and the product that
And
you put in
that's
before.
that's also defining the character that you need to have, because in a business development, except of being happy and excited with the success, you need to have a lot of armor to sustain against failures and shut and doors shut at your face and so on and so on, and never be exhausted, returning again and again and exploring, even in light of the tough conditions and the failures that you are, or the no that you are receiving. You need to have a certain character to sustain that and still continue day after day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'll allow. It is great to have you on the Life Science Success Podcast, and I loved hearing about Evogene and everything that you're working on. Thanks so much for being a guest, and I wish you a great 2025. And of course, as always, stay safe there. But I'm glad to see things start down this path. Hopefully,
Yeah.
where we'll see more, more resolutions as well, and that this wartime goes away as well.
Thank you
Yes.
very much, Don, for having me, and it was great talking with you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.